Hello, everyone. I am Ben Pick, and thank you for joining me in Running to Write, where I give questionable writing advice through running metaphors. Questionable writing advice through running metaphors. Sorry, I said that really quickly. I want to make sure it was clear. Anyways, thank you, everyone, for coming into the live chat. So let's see. Richard, he is here. He is first. Congratulations. Looks like Felicia's here too. Nicole, hey, how's it going? And Adrienne is here. Also, it is the day before her birthday, so woo, birthday parties. I don't actually have an incredible surprise on this show for their birthday. I'm sorry, sweetie. But I do apparently need to work because of capitalism. And yes, sure. Thank you, Richard. Help me quit my day job by buying my book. Yes, if a million people go out and buy my book, I promise I will quit my job tomorrow. Anyways, Adrian, thanks for coming here and saying hey. And also, I guess this doesn't really help, but it helps you all. So it can help you all quit your day jobs. I don't know. Either way, next week from the 6th through the 10th, well, sorry. If you're new here, I recently finished and published my third book. I'm about to start working on my fourth book, which is all about what tonight's episode is about. But anyways, my third book, Saving the Lost, is out now. It's an ebook paperback format. And as Richard included the link, he was kind enough to do that. But my first two books, Falling Through and Expanding Cracks, the first two books in this ongoing series, from next week on May 6th through the 10th, they'll be free in KDP. So if you have Amazon, if you support the Evil Empire, you can get my book for free. So tell your friends, tell your family, tell your neighbors, and let's get everyone reading Falling Through and Expanding Cracks, because that way they can start going into Saving the Lost. And that is all kinds of fun parties, because I really like what I did with this most recent book. Not going to go into the spoilers, but there are a lot of interesting reveals that were started in the first book, carried through the second, and finally come to fruition in book number 3. So yeah, agreed. But the game to number 4 is going to take a really long time. So the first 3 sort of were dominoes. Once the first one was done, the second one's basically written, and then because of that, the third one's basically written when the second one was done. But 4, I'm starting from scratch, which means that tonight I am right back into the outline process. Now, I'm a thorough outliner in that I leave little room to discover as I write. In the event that I get a flash of insight somewhere along the way, later on in the writing process, that inspires me to make significant changes, then I go back, update the outline to match, and then readjust everything as necessary. I did an episode a long time ago, I feel like it was the first season, about how to outline our novels, and it's time for an update on that, and I will get around to it, but maybe next season. But for tonight, this is about a specific type of outline called the Snowflake method. Essentially, we start with a core idea and expand outward until we have a unique, fully formed outline that looks much like a snowflake. It branches out with character arcs mapped over the story, plot points, and a scene list, all of which are meant to represent a snowflake and the unique way that it not spirals out, but it sort of branches out. In the end, I will have a robust outline. So it's more for in-depth outliners like myself, rather than pantsers or plantsers who like to discover the story as they write. There are no wrong processes, and whatever works best for you is the method you should stick with. Checking out chat because I see a bunch of things going through. Fractals. Thank you. That was the word I was thinking of. Yes. And yeah, I do a couple of different methods. So I also, in addition to Snowflake method, I have my entire floor gets covered in note cards. So it is physical and visual at the same time. Right. The ending. Yeah. Okay, yeah, yeah. There are a lot of different ideas. You could start at the end and then work your way backwards. I, at least with the Snowflake method, you start off with a core idea or theme, and I'll get into that in just a second. I like knowing where I am writing. Sorry, I like knowing where I'm writing to and what comes next. There's less mystery in this process because I have everything written down and defined. And I find I end up with blank page syndrome far less than when I've tried writing by the seat of my pants. And because that never really happened, there are parts where my outline isn't quite as filled out. During the second book, I had some swampy mill syndrome until I fixed that by lighting a building on fire. In the book, not actually. With all in mind, here are the 10 steps to perform the Snowflake outline method and the rough amount of time each should take. This is merely a guideline. I took more time on some of these steps and skipped others altogether. So, like with everything I say here, take what I say, adapt it how you need to, and make it your own. So, starting off with the very first thing, define the core idea of the story. Spend a full hour coming up with one sentence to define the story. What's the book about? This should preferably be short, and you shouldn't use names. Here's a good example I came up with, even though it's a little long, so I'll get into it, but it's not my story. And there are spoilers for a 20-year-old show and some spoilers for events up to about 1 or 2 years ago. I don't know. I don't keep track. All I know is what I hear on the internet. But basically, the core idea of this story that many of us might know is a 10-year-old boy leaves home to capture wild animals and fight them until he's the best like no one ever was, whatever that means. And that's pretty good condensed core idea minus the snide comment of whatever that means. Like I said, my size at the end. The key is to convey a core idea, overarching goal, and it's easy enough to work with. So 10-year-old fights wild animals and wants to be best. Now, step two, expand on that one idea into a full paragraph. Again, spend an hour on this. Here we can use names, but we don't have to. Going back to that example, the hero of the story will travel across the land, searching far and wide for wildlife to bend to his will. He'll help animals who have been abandoned, notably those are his strongest allies. He will face hardships and world-threatening dangers from well-funded criminal organizations. In the end, he will realize that the true treasure is the friends he made along the way while competing in a world championship competition. So, if you can guess what I'm using as an example, you're a nerd just like me. Step three, establish the character bios and lightly define their arcs. The main question to answer is, who does the hero meet on their journey? As the main character is largely a blank slate and pretty much an idiot, I skipped over him and created two bios for different characters in the that help the main character. But for my fourth book, I went overboard in in this section. This is one where I spent a lot more time than I should than the Snowflake method technically wants you to, because even though I've been trying to streamline and pare down the number of characters I have, there are 10 different character bios for my fourth book, including the villains. So you may want to make more or less depending on what you're doing. And that's not main characters, that is major and minor. So I wanted to come up with the hero, two friends. So there's three main people who are important, and then everyone else who surrounds them. Now I have a rotating list of point of view narrators. So the true main character slash hero is an ensemble of found family friends. That means I devoted more time than I may have needed for major characters who might otherwise be minor characters for your stories, where you have just one main POV and then everyone else who surrounds them. And we should spend about an hour for each character bio. Continuing with this example, that's not my story. We have the hero and two sidekicks. And again, I'm skipping over the hero because he's boring. So you have one friend who's named Brock. And after being defeated by the hero in a technicality and under life-threatening conditions, which should have called off the match, this person joins the hero with the goal of improving their cooking. Meanwhile, he abandons his brothers and job responsibilities to go on an undefined quest for an unknown amount of time. His conflict arises from taking care of the hero and not abandoning them under hardships like he did to his own family. And again, lots of stats here, lots of judgment about the show. Second, you have Misty, and her motivation is to stand out among her sisters. Her conflict arises from properly controlling her animals. They're quite powerful, but don't listen to instructions. She wants to be better at training them, and she also conned the hero into repaying her for the property he destroyed. Let's see how the um again, everything I know is from the internet, so I think so, but I feel like it was destroyed again. So I think he eventually did pay her back for that bike that just got immediately destroyed. And hey, what's up, R.A. Morley? Thanks for coming in. Yeah, I was trying to gloss over that character trait. He's also a great cook, so there's that. And every good party that wanders across the world needs a great cook. I'm ignoring some of those comments because that is some other things. Anyways, step 4, we want to expand the one paragraph summary into a full page. Ideally, take a full day to write the events of the story. Not going to read out my example, as that would be boring to do here. Instead, I'll give the highlights of what each paragraph should entail and end it with a closing statement. So, of that full page, the first paragraph is for the exposition and includes the inciting incident. The second paragraph is the first major conflict. Third paragraph is the second major conflict, and this should result in the low point for the characters. The fourth paragraph details the third major conflict. Here, the problems are compounding, and this leads to the climax. The last paragraph is the resolution, so it might be the end of the climax along with the resolution. Here's an example of the ideal resolution for the hero's journey of my example. So, that final paragraph, I'm sort of showing you how to end that one full page summary. Spoilers for the show, which, if you haven't guessed, is Pokemon. After kidnapping animals from multiple countries, the hero now has a team of fighters ready to do battle in an organized global league. And spoiler alerts in 3, 2, 1. Well, he defeats his opponents and wins the world tournament, thus achieving his goal of becoming the best at animal fighting. He overcame each individual challenge and pushed his animal companions to the point of breaking until he achieved total victory. Now he's a 10-year-old child with 20 years of experience. In other words, he is every employer's dream. So with that full page summary out of the way, we go back to the characters. And step 5, expand on each character. Spend 1 to 2 days to analyze all the major characters and develop full arcs for them. If you follow the Snowflake guide to the letter, then each major character has a full page breakdown, and each minor character has half a page to devote to them. I don't go that far. What I do instead is spend a lot of time on refining my character progressions. I don't like simple changes like a character who goes from not trusting people to being a great team member. That may be a good starting point, but would likely result in a character and arc which feels static or too predictable. Instead, here for you all, I'll hint at what's coming in book 4. One of my main character arcs will deal with a character being pressured to be untrusting, to essentially be a spy against their friends. Through the story, they'll grow and change in a way which will grant them agency to face the challenge for better or worse. So I'm not saying what way they may or may not go with that. As a side note, and this is where I blend steps 5 and 6, which is the next point I'm going to make, but I note where plot points and obstacles are meant to align with character arcs. And I have pointers in both sections pointing to each other things. So I'll have like a character arc of character 3 will go through this specific arc at these specific points. See specific paragraph in the plot synopsis, which is the next step, step 6. And then in step 6, I'll say, here's the plot points. Here's what I want my characters to do. Here's where I want their character arc to progress to at this specific level. So they're like, this is the start where there's the problem. The middle is where they recognize the problem, and then the end is where they resolve the problem. And then I'll have references to the character arc in step 5, which is what we're currently in. In my own flavor of the Snowflake method, I cross-reference myself between these sections. That way, I don't forget important details, and I make sure to build in plot points which properly challenge the characters to grow. Number 6, step 6, expand that plot synopsis. It's not enough to have just one page. So take a week to expand that one-page plot synopsis. This should include a full list of obstacles. The exposition and ending are recommended to be half a page each. The part I do like is that each of the 3 mil sections get a page devoted to them. So we have half a page for the intro, inciting incident, exposition, half a page for the probably the end of the climax, tail end of the climax, resolution, denouement, and then a page each for each of the major obstacles along the way. By having a clear idea of where the story is going, thanks to our first 1 page summary, we can now expand on each of those paragraphs into full pages and plan it out this way. Thus, we can determine early on if part of the story is lagging. So if writing that second page is difficult, or writing that third page is difficult because we don't really have the point of no return or the point where everything feels like it's going to fail, well, that might be an indicator to either refine what we're working on or go back to an earlier step and try and figure out where we might have been led astray. Because while in the planning stage, it is easy to identify and fix everything we go through because we haven't gone through that much. So within the development life cycle, bringing the work life into this, it costs, I don't know, there's some measure of how much it costs at each stage of the life cycle for developing an app. So if you recognize a bug in production, it costs, I think, 100 or 1,000 times more to fix that bug than it does if we caught it in development. So if you catch it in development, very easy to do because the developer can then make a few changes and maybe the next commit. So it might take him a day to fix a bug. Very easy to do. So you're only losing the amount of time of the one developer. Then if you go to the next stage and you catch something in QA, well, then you're wasting the developer's time because we need to fix the bug. And then the QA person had to analyze it and determine where the problem was and what it was and whatever, and maybe give recommendations on where to fix it. But eventually when you get to production, well, then you have the lost revenue from the customer who loses confidence in the company. You have the help desk person who needs to be there to figure out where the problem is. Either way, the whole point is that if you identify the later on in the Snowflake method, or when we're actually writing our book, the later on that we detect plot issues or things along those lines, the more expensive, the more mentally intensive it is for us to actually fix the problem, if we even can, without making drastic alterations. So nice little long rant, bringing it back into step 7, building character charts. So again, we're kind of going plot, characters, as we're expanding each with each step. So this should take about a week. I do kind of skip this step. My character bios are usually robust now, but I'll take the time to expand them and realign them with my ideal plot now that I have, thanks to step 6, a fairly solid idea of what's going to happen in the story. This is the part where a lot of people get lost, so be sure to only devote a week to this. Many writers create lush backstories, relationships, physical descriptions, even character art. That's largely excessive, in my opinion, for figuring out what our characters are, who they are, what they need to do, who they should be within our stories. Put another way, spending more than 1 week here feels like procrastinating rather than idea inspiration and outlining. I mean that if in the pre-writing stages, so we haven't actually written the words on the page yet, although I've fuzzed that detail too anyways, because as I'm going through this process, I'm in the middle of here. So I guess when I was at step 5 or something like that, I was going for a walk with my dog and I had just the perfect way to start off chapter 1. So I wrote that down as soon as I could. So anyways, all these idea generations leaves me skipping all around throughout this process. But anyways, I've lost my train of thought. But yeah, so if we technically haven't written anything within our story yet, but are already generating character art, that feels like it is more of a distraction and a way to not write than a method of defining who our characters are for building our character charts. Now, step 8, Richard, you'll be really happy to see this one. Yeah, 1 week equals 40 hours. Sure. I don't know exactly if it equates to business hours, but yeah, whatever you want to. A lot of this is up to open to interpretation. My week will likely be about a full month. but we'll be I leave it to your own discretion, yes, in terms of how long each of these things should take. And yes, Richard, you're right. Step 8, develop a scene spreadsheet. So do this for a week. And yes, spreadsheets, spreadsheets, spreadsheets. There are tools that can streamline the steps, so you don't necessarily need to use an Excel spreadsheet. Plotter and many others allow visual representations of scenes across the timeline. I prefer the old school method. I use Excel and define each scene on its own row, more than one if there are transitions within a scene. So if you're going from one scene to the next, if you're in a house to a car to school, whatever, I have my own process, but whatever works for you works best. And there should only be one sentence at most to get the idea down and in their general order. So I'm bringing this up right now to accurately describe what each of my what my spreadsheets should look like. So I have a list of, the first column is the chapter list. The second column is the title, because each of my chapters has their own title, which is something I regret doing, but at this point I've gone too far in this. I'm 3 books in, so I put a lot of thought into what these titles are, and in order to do that, I develop them either before writing, where I have an idea I want to get across, and I put them down, and then that shapes the chapter, or afterwards when I write the chapter and then decide what the chapter should be called. Then I have a summary for what the chapter entails. I try and keep that up to 5 words at most. It's not even a full sentence. It's just really, really briefly what's going on. Then I have a column for POV, so I can see exactly if one person is talking too much, if I have a whole bunch of the same character as the point of view for multiple chapters in a row without reason. I do have a couple of chapters where I wanted, in previous books, where I wanted a specific character to have multiple scenes. And because the way that those scenes were unfolding, they turned into being very, very long, and there were transitions. So I broke them up, but it ended up resulting in having one character with lots of POVs in a row. Then I have the word count for each chapter along with the next row, which is goal. So there's the actual word count, and then there's my goal for each chapter. And right now I haven't put any thought into what my goal should be. So each chapter's goal is 1,500 words for the most part. I also have a few character POVs where I want to intentionally keep things short. So it's 1,500s the whole way down, plus one with 500. Then there's I don't know, this is kind of weird for me, but it's a reduction chapter. It is if I recognize that a chapter has 5,000 words, 6,000 words, what should I take out of it? That was more of an issue for my first book, but it is something I just sort of carried through for all my later books. Then we have my own tracking method, which is a good pace of 1,500 words. And so I kind of track how my own writing process is going with each chapter. And then I have dates, which is where in the story this specific event takes place. That way I can make sure that there are no teleportation when there shouldn't be, because I do deal with fantasy elements to it where teleportation is present. And then I have finally notes, and that's more for myself. If there are any contradictions or plot holes, this is where I make notes to myself. So all that to say, this spreadsheet is more robust than these two. I could probably take out a few of these columns, but the important ones are chapter, title, summary, POV, word count, and dates within the story. So that is something that you can take with and use as you need. And however you want to do it, the line item should not be that long, so it should be one sentence at most. Like I said, I only have a couple of words per each column, but you want to get your ideas down and have a general order for the flow of the story, but you don't want to have anything too robust within the spreadsheet. Step 9, expand each scene. So spend about a week here, and we're almost at the end. So here's the fun mental task. This is where we add all the details based on the spreadsheet. So I would have a spreadsheet here, and then I would have each chapter gets its own Word document where I would define exactly what goes into each chapter. And then I use those to, um, so I go from the spreadsheet to each chapter having a couple paragraph explanation of exactly what's going to happen within that scene, within that chapter. And then I skip a few pages and I start writing that specific chapter on page 10. So that way I have 10 pages of notes to myself about what needs to take place here, character arcs, everything that I've been working on in the previous steps, I include in those 10 pages. And then I have a model that I can jump back to for when I actually start writing. And this is a fun mental task. I add all the details from the spreadsheet, from the Word documents, from the character bios everywhere. And I include a list of which characters are involved in the scene, the plot progression, the themes, and any major changes which occur during or due to the scene. I also use this to track the timeline of the story to ensure I don't make a mistake plot-wise. So all of those fun details get thrown together in multiple places so that I'm absolutely certain that I'm not missing details, that I say something happens on, January 1st and suddenly it's back in December, or it's a month later, it's February, without reason. This is a step-by-step listing of my story. And from here, step 10, do the draft. Finally, if my rough math is good, it should have taken 5 to 6 weeks to get here if you're following the Snowflake method exactly. For me, a couple months, but well, not a couple, but probably going to be 2 months. But now that we're done with all the prep work, writing should come easy. The earlier steps were used to generate ideas and plan where to lay the next brick on the road that we're running on. That way, we never get to the end of a path without knowing where to turn next. These metaphors are a little rough and intermingling running with building the roads themselves. That's irrelevant. It's time for us to actually and officially start making forward progress in our stories with the precious word count goals. A few closing comments. Don't hesitate to change any of the previous steps at any time. If you are all the way at step 9 and you recognize that, hey, these dates don't line up, so I need to fix where characters are moving around and who's doing what, or school doesn't start on a specific day, or it's weird that they're on holiday on spring break when it's the fall, or things like that. Go back and make the changes. This is the perfect time to fix the problems as we recognize them. Just because an idea seems good as a single sentence, so in that very first core idea, doesn't mean it'll fit in our full length novels. If we do make a change, try to minimize the amount of work to redo. That's my own personal goal. Otherwise, we can get in a perpetual loop of planning rather than writing. So if we're going forward and we say, oh, chapter 12 has such and such plot hole, well, then I need to go back and fix everything leading up to that specific point. But then you keep going back and saying, oh, well, then that means that this doesn't line up. So I got to go back and fix this. Then this doesn't line up. Well, what about this? And we can very easily get stuck in our head without actually writing the story and just doing only the prep work. There's a lot which goes in the Snowflake method for prepping your novels. I don't use all the steps to their fullest, but most of them greatly help me out to plan my stories. It's a lot to spend a full month writing without writing, and this is just another tool in our belt to use as needed. Well, I'm Ben Pick, and thank you for joining me in Writing to Write. I hope you consider giving the Snowflake method a try if you really like outlining and really like taking a deep dive into your story before you actually start writing the story. Let me know in the comments whether you use the Snowflake method or how you outline your own drafts. And I'm going to check in the comments to see how things are going. Hey, Jordan, thanks for coming here, and no worries about being late. Just glad you're here. Yeah, step 10, right. Let's see here. So there's comments about 150, sorry, 1,500 words per chapter. I just lost it though. Let me see if I can find it again. Nope. Sorry, Richard, I lost it. Hopefully you can repeat it. Oh, 15,000 words a chapter. That seems short. Yeah, it is, but it is a good starting point. So my books tend to be 90,000 words with about 35 chapters. And so the math comes out to actually being about 2,000 words per chapter. But having that 1,500 goal, it's a good starting point. So some of the chapters might be short, but if you can't tell by this podcast, I tend to ramble. So saying that 1,500 marker is a good goal because I'll look up and realize I have 3 to 5,000 words there, and then I'm like, oh well, that's a lot. That's a lot to handle. So I need to either cut words back, split this up into multiple chapters, or just recognize that I'll have 1 or 2 chapters that are a little bit beyond that. So saying the goal of that 1,500 helps keep me in line. That's the best way I can put it. Thank you. Yeah. Quick question before we go up. Don't eat apples. Whoa. Oh, cool. So I did a video before about the 5 birthdays and novels include Percy Jackson. Oh, yeah. Yep. I did enjoy doing the favorite birthdays and favorite birthday parties. So I think I described how Percy Jackson has one of the worst birthdays because it seems like every time it's his birthday, it's a summer birthday, and it ended in disaster each time. So yeah. Also, the Lord of the Rings party was a lot of fun too. So Bilbo Baggins's 151st birthday. That was a fun one. I enjoyed reading that because he insults all of his, because it was his way of saying goodbye to the Shire. He puts on the ring and disappears. And then before he does that, though, he insults all of his guests with riddles and wordplay that allow Tolkien to just show off his skills as a wordsmith. That's the best way of putting it. Cool. Well, I think that's it. And I'm going to start wrapping up. So I post my running and writing progress on Instagram and Twitter as Writing to Write. Be sure to follow me, join with your own thoughts. I post a couple of pictures from when I did my in-person vendor sales. Lots of fun there. I've done some running. It's getting hotter out, so you get to watch me complain about how 65 is way too hot out. Don't forget to sign up for my Writing to Write monthly newsletter that is coming out this week because we're on Monday. And I'll have freebies in there. So I'm doing more newsletter swaps, which means that you get to benefit from discovering, finding new authors. I tend towards the same style of things that I write. So we're talking fantasy, things that I write or read. So I tend towards the fantasy, science fiction. And on May 3rd, you'll be able to get a free book if you sign up for my newsletter. Not one of my books. That's next week. But you will be able to just discover new indie authors, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So we'll see if I can keep this up, but I'm going to likely, I have a newsletter swap for this month. I have one planned for next month. So if you are in my newsletter, you will be getting free books this month and next month at least. That being said, don't forget to tell your friends, family, neighbors, coworkers, bosses, just blast out everywhere. May 6th through the 10th, Falling Through and Expanding Cracks are free in KDP. So we can, sorry, I'm doing this impromptu, so I'm just going to see how well this works as I stall for time. And we are finding this on Amazon, and here we go. So we've got right here. Oh yeah, we do also have blackberries, which are growing. They're almost ready. As for our strawberries, the squirrels already got to a few of them. So unfortunately, I saw a couple. They always go for the strawberries like a day before they're ripe or a week before they're ripe. So the strawberries I saw that were half eaten were basically red with a little bit of green on the end, and it is the saddest thing to see because it's half eaten and those squirrels are dicks. And Rufus does nothing to defend against our house. In fact, we keep saying that he gets bribed by the squirrels because whenever I see them in our backyard, I send it Rufus out, and he doesn't even care that there's squirrels in there. Like he only chases after them when they are dead, when they're roadkill in the street. So yeah, I posted in here. Let me put this on screen. This right here is Falling Through on Amazon, and starting next week, the ebook version will be free. This is Expanding Cracks, so May 6th through the 10th of 2024. These books will be free and available for people in KDP. And there was one other thing I wanted to say, but I think I forgot it. So, oh, right, newsletter. This is the last thing because it's about Rufus. So Rufus has birthday this past weekend. And so there are photos and updates about that. We didn't do anything that crazy, but I just did a little tribute to Rufus and how awesome he is. So if you like photos of Rufus, if you like free books, sign up for my newsletter. Also, if you like free books, if you like what I do here, check out those lists. Those links I posted on May 6th through the 10th, and you can get free books. And yes, of course, he slept through most of it. All Rufus does is sleep. Now, with that in mind, I am Ben Pick. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for being here while I ramble. See you next time. Until then, create fully realized outlines if that helps you write your novel. Now, if you're a pantser, if you don't, then thank you for being here and at least listening to everything I had to say about this very, very robust and elaborate method of outlining. I will see you all next week as season 6 comes to a close and I talk about endings and perhaps endings which, how do you know if an ending has gone on too long? And since we're closing on the 40-minute mark, I'm going to say goodbye because yeah, this episode has been going on for far too long. So see y'all next week. It's been fun. Take care.